What's up, everybody? Austin Folingo here with jamplay.com. Hopefully everybody's hanging in there. Welcome to the new course. This is jazz chord solos. This is going to be a good one here. So, yeah, if you guys followed my last course, which was Slices of Jazz, we kind of talked about like a little bit of soloing, how to read chord charts, the various forms of that. Good 2/5s to use, all that kind of stuff. So, and then we did some single line solos as well. So this course is going to cover all the cool little fancy chords. You know, the So yeah, if y'all are into that kind of stuff, this is going to be the course for you. We're going to cover several things and then kind of write a few chord solos towards the end of the course to, you know, so everybody can get their feet wet with this stuff. So yeah, we kind of got a lot of stuff to cover today, so let's just get started here. So lesson number 1 is triads. If you read the description, it's triads via the cage system. So first of all, what are triads? Triads are three, right? 3-note, roots, thirds, fifths, you know, the meat and potatoes, the building blocks of the house, right? From there, you know, you kind of have your upper extensions or your colors, right? So that's kind of a good way to think about it. You know, it's just the core, right? So also, like I said earlier about the cage system, if you're wondering, and this lesson is, for some of y'all, it might be a little, you know, it helps to know a little bit of harmony. It helps to know the guitar neck. I mean, this is definitely, there's going to be some stuff, if you know, you want to get really good at this, you want to, you know, put the time in, you know, and do some stuff on your own for sure. But you know, yeah, knowing that kind of stuff helps. But we're going to kind of go through it, you know, piece by piece here. So the cage system, right, is C, A, G, E, D. And pretty much your basic open chords, right? There's your C, looks like a C, right? You know, your old folk, you know, cowboy chords kind of stuff. Then you have your A chord like that, right? Your G chord like that, E, and D, right? So it kind of derives, I guess, from the those basic chords, right? Now, with the cage system, those are the 5 forms of chords, right? And I'm going to do all these triads today in C just to keep it simple, and then I'm going to show you guys different ways to practice this to kind of get to know the fretboard better. But the cage system is great. Some people don't like it, some people do. I think it's fine. Remember that this is a puzzle piece, right? And this is just another device to help you learn what's inside of that, right? So just real quick, and like I said, some of this you want to do on your own. This is more about jazz chord solos, so I'm not going to get too fundamental here, but if here's your C form, right? So the next form is A, right? So we need a C form, a C chord that looks in that form. So that's where that one comes from. So if you've ever wondered, like, you know, your C bar chord like that, it's, you know, root 5th, root, you know, and then your 3rd right there. You know, that's your A form because it looks like an A chord, right? We're just having to move up to compensate because we're playing a C chord, really, right? Then you have your G form like this that nobody would ever play just to jam out to. It's just a way to see the neck, right? So, like I said, it looks like a G. If you were to capo 5 and play it there, that's kind of why that exists, right? And then moving on from there, we have an E form, you know, another very guitar-friendly chord, you know, like that. Looks like an E, right? Then we have a D form, another one of the lovely ones that nobody's ever really going to use, but it just shows you the area, right? Looks like a D there. And then we're up the octave to C again like this, right? And then you'd want to go back down. So like I said, that's the cage system. So any sort of chord can follow that formula. So if we took F, for example, right? A good way to practice this is like, well, where's my lowest F chord on the guitar neck? So, you know, sometimes it takes a minute to think about it, but I know this, right? So right there, right? So now what you have to say is, okay, well, that's an F chord, but what form is that? And remember with caged, it always follows that acronym. So, well, this is definitely an F chord, but it looks like an E form, right? So after E form, what is it? D form. right? Then you start over to C form. You have that, right? A form. G form, like I said, the lovely one that nobody ever jams on. And then you're back to the E form again, right? And then back, you know, then back down. Right? Now, like I said, you know, a couple minutes a day, this kind of stuff, go through all 12 keys. You'll get the hang of it, and you will see your chords across the neck, I promise. Like I said, it's a great tool to do that. That also goes with learning your arpeggios, your scales, you know, your major scales, all that stuff. Like, by doing that, you know, for me, it was never the most fun thing to do. I always preferred the make music part rather than the technical side. But you kind of got to do both, right? And especially if, you know, you find yourself playing blues in F or something, and you're down here with that kind of, you know, that side of it, but then you're getting lost up there. Like, by learning all that information and learning certain areas, and certain areas are better than others, you know, absolutely, you know, in terms of shapes and everything, you know, along the guitar neck. But like I said, it's just good information to know. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you triads, but I'm going to show it to you via the cage system. And there's a bunch of different ways to look at it, but I think you'll kind of see my perspective here in a second. So if we would, guys, let's pull up major triads from the supplemental material. All right. So there we have it, major triads, right? So you see, I have this all marked out with fingerings, so you guys can always go back if you have a question. Not the only fingerings you can use, like I said, these just happen to work for me, right? But how I have it planned out is basically going through all these shapes. And these are kind of like the triads that you can play on the neck, right? So let's start with C, right? Our first one from the highest register is right there. Close enough, tune-wise. Right? E, C, G, right? And then you go to the next set of strings, right? So on a guitar, it's gonna happen in sets of 3 like that, right? And then we have there, right? C like that, and there. And like I said, check out the fingerings. I won't go over those too much unless some of them are, you know, super useful and, you know, yeah, and if I just feel like it's a great way to do it. But and then we have that, right? So we're all familiar. Like I said, these are very simple triads right here because it's coming from just the straight C chord, right? So I think a lot of us are probably pretty comfortable with those kind of, you know, that kind of territory, right? And like I said, then you get inverted, you know, highest note there is E, right? And then C, G, E again, right? And also known as, you know, your root, your first inversions and your second inversions, right? So like I said, in terms of the system of cage, we're starting with C because it's just it starts with the acronym of caged, right? There's your C versions, right? Not too bad, right? And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna move to more A through G forms, right? So, and you're gonna notice when you learn these triads, they kind of have a pattern on the neck. And then we'll talk about different ways to practice them later, but you'll notice once you kind of get used to, you know, the way they move on the neck, it sort of becomes muscle memory, right? So now we have to move to the next set, which is up here. So we got G, E, and C, right? Right? Now that kind of comes from the top of that chord, right? And then we have there, which is your A chord, like a bar. Now, like I said, I mean, you could kind of do it any way you want, but I have these fingered in a way where they're super accessible really fast to grab, right? And that just makes sense. And kind of how like this second set of them works is you have, you know, there's your C, and these are all major, right there, and that's still kind of an A form. And now, remember this chord, right? Now we're moving into more of this land. So that's why I bar there, because then when you go to the next one, sometimes with guitar too, you know, I will say, you kind of like, it's good to think ahead, right? Like, even though you might be super comfortable because you've played this chord like that all the time and you want to go, and that's okay too if you can, you know, grab that just as fast. And, you know, I mean, I guess some people can, but like I said, I just find it easier just to already have there, so then you can just put your third there and grab that triad, right? So then from the bottom up you have, you know, C, G, E, and then put your pinky out there and we have G, E, and C, right? So from the beginning we have right, and then right, and now we're moving into more E and D form territory. Right, so like I said, also if any of this kind of tends to confuse you at first, always just go back to like the straight big form of the chord, right? So knowing we're in E form, if you're like, oh, this is kind of weird, just jump back to that, you know, and I feel like it really helps see that. I also will say visually from this standpoint, like, you know, I look at everything like that as shapes, and I feel like it helps a whole lot. You know, I mean, I can, and like I said, that's why the cage system and all that is so important, is once you start to see all that, it's kind of like, you know, green light, boom, 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 you know. Right? So now, okay, we're up here, right? E form. And then kind of moving into D form, right? So you have that, and then you have that little guy, and then that, right? And I think we're all gonna find, especially if you've been playing for a while, like the ones on the top strings, you know, they're probably a little bit more, you know, we're used to some of that. And, you know, this is also stylistic stuff too, I will say, guys. And like, this is where triads can really, really help. They can definitely help come up with cooler voicings, especially in the lower registers like this. It almost sounds like Baroque, right? But, you know, like you can come up with all these great little figures. You know, I'm kind of moving out of C there, the way I'm thinking of it. But, you know, that, like, stuff like this, you know, as guitar players, we don't do that a whole lot, but we have access to that kind of stuff, you know. So it's good to kind of know all that. Now, I'm going to kind of piece all that together at the end of this lesson, too, where it'll be a little bit clearer and you'll see, like, more of the fun side of it. But, like, I will say, too, like, examples, like, you know, triads in the high register, which is we're maybe used to more, they work great. Like, if you're recording, you know, say you're recording a reggae song, right? And, you know, you have... right, we have a C to an F to a G, right? Simple. So, you know, you start, you know, your song with those kinds of inversions. And if you ever listen to records and stuff, you know, there's things that are panned left and right, and, you know, anything recording wise too, you always, like, you know, you're trying to make things more interesting by adding layers. And, you know, that's kind of the beauty of it, and I think why people love records in, you know, different ways, you know, I mean, that and the production and everything else about them. But, you know, like, say you do that with one guitar part, and then, you know, to add interest, you can use triads like this. And then add another layer. C, F, G. You see my point? And, like, just by kind of knowing these little simple things, other than just big old, you know, stock chords, it helps, you know, and it helps from a live standpoint of making, you know, just doing something different than what, you know, Guitar Player 1's doing, from a recording standpoint. In so many ways. I mean, you know, like, just one more example and then we'll keep moving on. But, like, with, you know, if you do ever listen to Chet Atkins or something, you know, you know, one of his endings is, that's all triads, right? Look, just what we're learning here. You know, goes down there, but and then yeah. Right, bugada 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 bum. That's all triads, and like I said, that's why this stuff is super. To make it the minor version, right? Like I said, it's really nifty stuff. But like I said, sometimes we don't really concentrate on that in our playing. We just you want to do the single line and and whatever else. It's like I said, spend time on this stuff because there's a lot of great stuff in there. Okay, so going back to major, like I said, those are some great examples and ways to use triads that we've all heard, right? So, right, so we have those moving from E form and then to D form, and now this is what I think is important too. Now you go up the octave, right? So this is C form again. But know that, right? And it's no different than this, except down here we're using open strings, so the fingerings are different. But learn that stuff. Learn it back and forth because, like I said, it's super useful. Don't just stop when it's going to start over and go back down to the beginning, right? Because, like I said, those fingerings are different. Having it an octave higher, it helps grab the listener in a different way. Right? So like I said, those are your major triads going through Cage system. So like I said, from a visual aspect, looking down at the neck, I just see that C chord right there like that, right? Now, from there, right, I see the A chord like that, and then I shift to, the A form, but in C, but then I switch to G like that, right? For the last two. Exactly why it's important to see all these chords, I'll say once again. And then your E form, like I said, you can always start with the basic, main big chord, all 6 strings. Then moving into D land, right? And then up the octave. And you want to get good at it like that, Oops. Right? So those are our major, right? We have root, third, fifth. Guys, if we would, let's move to minor now. So, and I know a lot of us, we know this. Minor's just coming from... you flat the third, right? So there's, if you read music, there's your flat in there, and obviously with the you have the tab too, which changes it, right? Now here's the thing too, in lower registers we don't have an E flat down here accessible unless we detuned, and that would be weird, right? So you skip that one, right? But you have that one, right? And like I said, just it may be new to you, some of you guys may know this, but just sometimes just not even playing a full amount of the chord, it's nice, Just little 3-note voicings, right? Like I love that for a C minor. It's a neat sound, but like I said, anyways, go back to your main chord. So here's, like I said, I'm C, now we're C minor, but there's your meat and potatoes there. Skip that, obviously, because there's no E flat, so then you move on to the next one, right? So we have that, and that covers the C area, right? And then we move up here, so there's your C minor chord like that. A form, right? Major, minor, looks like an A minor, right? And then we have... right, so I like to generally do a little mini bar and then have my finger second there, and then you can just grab your pinky down there. Right, and and that's moving between forms A through G, like I mentioned earlier, just in minor land. Right? And then we're moving up to E form, so, which as guitar players is very, you know, we all know that one pretty well. And there's all our triads, right? And then moving all the way up the octave, right? And that's where you can actually utilize that note, but you have... Right? Looks the same, just up an octave. Like I said, I would go back down. So those are your minors. And like I said, you know, some of these voicings, they're nice, you know? And it's not only the voicings, like I said earlier too, but like, it just helps you see all that stuff around the neck. And, you know, like I said, I'm just using cage for the example, because I think cage is a great way to learn the neck. But the more you see of that stuff, you know, the better off you are. Now, there's two other kinds of triads here that we're going to talk about, and those are augmented triads and diminished triads. So, guys, if you would, let's go to augmented now. So, like, you know, that sound, right? If anybody remembers a little band, you know, by the name of the Beatles, remember, oh darling, right? So, oh darling, please be, I'll never make it. Right? Great song, right? Great band. You know, and you hear that a lot, and you know, intros, outros, whatever. But that's a great use. It just, you know, of an augmented sound, right? So this is, you know, the majors and the minors we're definitely used to. This is getting a little bit, you know, funnier, kind of into more jazz land. Not necessarily like "Oh Darling's" a great pop song that they, you know, they utilize that just fine. But like I said, all the fingerings are there. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but, you know, like I said, I think C, and then what is an augmented triad? Well, you have a root, you have a third, and you have a sharp 5, right? In jazz land, also known as a flat 13 sometimes, right? You know, sharp 5, augmented, remember when we talked about in the last course, like the plus sign, that means augmented. If you see C plus, C augmented, right? It's that sound. Now, what's kind of cool about augmented triads, and we'll go through them. If we start from here, like I said, I always visually just look, you know, from the bottom of the neck. You have that one, that one, that one, and that one. And what you kind of notice is on like the bottom sets of strings, it becomes this 1, you know, 3, 2, 1 fingering. And then it just moves up a fret and then down another set of strings, right? And then like here we have, it actually does it all the way through. For some reason, I don't know why I didn't say that earlier, but yeah, you have, it's just kind of weird because you have that open string down there, but it's the same pattern, right? So that's from the C perspective, and then my A, and looking at my G perspective, except we're augmented now, right? So sharp your 5, your G becomes sharp, sharp 5, augmented, plus sign, however you like to look at it. Then you have your E note and your C note. And like I said in the beginning, kind of knowing, you know, your basic notes, your meat and potatoes of all this kind of stuff, it definitely does help. Like, I will say this, don't look at this as just a bunch of shapes. And when I started learning this stuff, I was like, oh, okay, cool, these are just cool, you know, shape things I do in the key of C. But it's like, no, don't think like that. Like, think about what the notes are. Sometimes if then an F chord comes along, say, well, what are the notes in this, you know, F chord, you know? And when you start really, you know, checking that kind of stuff out too, it's like, I don't know, you think bigger, it's like you can come up with, life just makes more sense musically, right? So it follows the same pattern. Then you have here. Right, so augmented's kind of easy in a way. It's just, for your ear, it's kind of a stranger sound. But follows the same pattern, which is nice. And remember, augmented, sharp 5. But like up there, I don't know, just from a creative standpoint, you know, you do all kinds of, you know, neat stuff like that. Right, so there's your augmented triads, right? Okay, now guys, let's move into, if we can, let's do diminished triads. So what is a diminished, right? You have a root, and then you have a flat third and a flat 5. Probably the hardest to maybe learn, just I guess shape-wise. I don't know. At least it always was for me. So we can't do a diminished here, right? Because we don't have the tools. We don't have the notes because we're dealing with open strings, right? Like I said, I'm always backing it up to what form I'm at and then moving through. So that's not going to happen. Can't do that because we can't flat the G there, right? Let's move on to the next one. And like, look, eventually you're going to get really good at this and you're going to go, well, that's just a waste of my time. I don't even need, I know that having an open E and an open G there isn't going to work, right? And like I said, eventually you won't have to think about that, but it's always good just to kind of start from the beginning and keep moving, right? So there we can't do it either because we still have that open G, but can we do it here? Yes. Right? We have an E flat, we have a C, and we have a G flat, right? And remember, on a guitar, what's always cool about diminished is every minor third or every 3 frets, the notes restack each other and repeat each other, hence the kind of that never-ending diminished sort of sound. So, you know, once you know these, you can always move them up, you know, in sets of, you know, 3 frets. And it's a neat sound, right? All right, so then, like I said, moving on to the next, and like I said, these are definitely, I feel like the trickiest. So start with your basic chord, C, okay, so now start with your basic major triad. This is another good way to work with triads, all right? So you know, here's major, which is a root 3, 5. So with diminished, we have a flat 3, so you just flat your 3 first, and then go, okay, well now it needs to be a flat 5 as well, so move it back like that, right? And there's your diminished. Now, like I said, also known the trick of every 3 frets. Like gypsy jazz, you know, there you go. There's a whole lick you can get a ton of mileage out of right there. Right? But there'd be our first one. And now go to our second one. Right? And you know, that's a pretty familiar you know, or in gypsy jazz for sure, but just diminished chord in general. Right? But in terms of triads, it's right there. Flat 3, root, flat 5. All right, now we have a root. Moving on to the next set, you know, and I'm always thinking 3, 3, 3, 3, right? Going to the lower octave. So then we have that root, flat 5, flat 3, and then the last one, which is kind of the stretch, which I usually do 2, 1, 2, and 4, is that. Right, and that kind of covers them through here, for the A form and the G form, right? All right, and now we're moving to E form. So like I said, start major, and eventually you'll get the hang of this where you don't want to think about this, but you know, use what you got. Start with the big chord, major, minor, okay, we need to flat the 5, here's the 5, flat that, and we have that. All the fingerings, like I keep saying, are on there, so I won't get too caught up in that for, you know, lack of time, but, right, so there's our first guy, right? This one. Every 3 frets works as a great lick. And then that's another kind of useful, you know, if you like that kind of sound. And And then our next set, right? And like I said, just think of the notes, and this is why it's important to know the notes, you know, as well, whether you think in numbers or letters, you know, but just knowing, okay, flat 5, flat 3, root. All right, so now I just need to alter this note, right? Because so we already have flat 3, there's root, here's my 5, flat that, and you have that. And then we have root, flat 5, I need a flat 3, which is E flat, right? And then up the octave, you know, then it's like, all right, well, that needs to be flat. Right, so here's our major chord. And then we have E is the third, move that back. C right there, we're good, that's the root. And sometimes with the diminished triad, it's the fingerings as well, just because of the shapes are kind of strange. But, you know, work on them and you'll get them under your fingers. And then we have the 5, flat that, right? Okay, so now we have root, right? We have flat 5. Now I need to find my flat third on the 4 string, so it's right there, right? And now I have a flat 5, I have a flat 3. Now I need to find my root on the 5th, right? To move to the next 3 strings, right? And then from there, we have my flat 3, 1, and then flat 5 right there, which is this again, right? Okay, so those are kind of the basic sorts of, you know, triads. Now let's kind of turn it into, well, check this out. Let's talk about a practice form too, right? Or a practice guide, if you will. So knowing all these, we'll just go back, you know, we'll do augmented for fun, right? So what you want to do is now pick another chord. So we said F earlier. We'll just pick F again just to keep it consistent and be easy. So you want to find your lowest F first, right? Okay, well, it's right here. Okay, so now we know our majors, right? Then we're in your minors. We'll just go through all of them, actually. Augmented. Right? Diminished. Can it be done? Yeah. Right? So there you go. And then you'd have... Right? Okay, so that covers the E, right? This is the E form through the D, right? Now we have to move into the... Now C like this, right? So start with your majors. Minors. Right? Augmented. And then you'd want to do diminished. So you'd... Right? Now we're moving into A form, right? So kind of the second cycle that I showed you, we just started on the E through D cycle first because that's the lowest part of F, right? Minor. Augmented, and then you're diminished. Or wait, hold on. And then you'd move all the way up to here again. Right? And look, I mean, I know I did that really fast, and, you know, it's good to be able to do it that fast. You know, if you're super into it. But, you know, the thing is like, what all that does is it helps you see territory, and it helps you see those notes all around the neck, right? And, like, in this course, that's the thing is, like, as we... you know, start talking about, you know, by the end of it, we're going to be using a combination of drop 2 voicings, triads, all that kind of stuff. Mostly in the higher sets of strings because that's where the guitar speaks. That's where we tend to play melodies. And that's what the ear generally picks up, right? But like I said, the more stuff you know like that, the better off you are, and the less you are to get stumped on something, you know, and it's better than just knowing like some stock, you know, shapes and stuff, where if you could see where it comes from, and we'll talk about that as it moves on, right? So now let's, the next step here, right? Now that we know those all, and like I said, that's the best way to practice, guys. You could take 5 minutes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? With a cup of coffee and pick 3 keys and just try to go through all of that. You know, it takes a little while, but, you know, set goals, you know, give yourself a month and say, hey, I want to be able to get through these keys by that, you know, all those, you know, setting goals. I'm a big fan of that. I mean, it works great. And yeah, and then like just pick another key. Like say you went B flat. Okay, well, here's my B flat. First step is, where's the big B flat chord in the lowest register? Right there. It's an A form, so I must start with my triads like this. Right? Minor. You see what I'm getting at? And you know, you do it enough and then it's like boom, it you know, it clicks. So that's just knowing your triads, right? Now let's make it a little bit more musical. Rather than just sounding like a Baroque exercise, right? Or like you're tuning, or, you know, something. So now we could take like a chord scale, or like the diatonic progression, which just comes from a major scale, right? So in that, we're gonna go back to C. Here's C, right? You have right. I mean, that's the scale up and down every note you can, right? And then from there, you can have a chord scale, which is right? So what you can do then is do it with triads, right? And start from the lowest point. So, you know, diatonically, we have C. Oh, and if we can, let's pull up an example diatonic progression strings 1 through 4, or sorry, 1 through 3. My bad. And this is kind of what we're, you know, like I said, this is where it, you know, we'll get there. Give me a second, but this is where the music making gets really fun, right? So first off, we're gonna just go all the way up the scale and all the way down, right? But using chords. Or now we're gonna use triads, right? So you have C. Right? And now we need to find our next D minor. And this is why learning all your 12 keys and everything really helps, because, you know, think, all right, well, where's my lowest D, right? There. Well, now we need minor. So you start there, right? And then, like I said, you learn all that, it all becomes, you know, one and really starts to click. But if we were to play a diatonic progression like this, you'd have D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, sorry, B half diminished, or diminished because we don't really have some of the other extensions, and then C. And the thing is, though, is, you know, a lot of times as guitar players, we don't think like that. You know, we think, oh, well, here's our just stock, you know, meat and potatoes chords, and that's good too. But like, you know, if you're doing some cool like open string lick in the key of C and you're going, you know, D minor, F, G. Now bring it up an octave. C, D minor, F, right? And that's where this stuff gets really cool, and you can make some really neat, you know, some really cool music just by, like, you know, it's another flavor, right? And just like when we really get into the series, we're doing chord solos. It's different than single lines, you know? And it's fun to do this stuff. It's fun to know this stuff. And like, even when I went up the octave, right? You could have went D minor. And instead of going to the F up here, what if I went down to here? Now to G right here. And see what I'm saying? By knowing your different sets of triads and knowing which forms they come from, right? Like when I went up here, when I started down here, right? And this is just based on the example pretty much. You know, I know that's the lowest C triad, right? And there's my D minor. Well, that's a nice low D minor right there. E minor, right? And then F right here. And like, I'm literally like, this is how I'm thinking about it, I guess. And this is why I'm saying the cage system is important with it, is I'm looking at this as, okay, it's coming from a C right there. And then I'm thinking D, I mean, that, we kind of all know that D minor, so it's kind of an easy one, but I'm thinking of it from all those. E minor, same thing. This is, you know, you don't really play E minor like that a lot. You do that, right? But, or this or something. But that's, you know, coming from just, I literally see all those sets, you know, and like kind of pick my option. And then, you know, here's my F, and it's like, okay, well, that's coming from the C form F, just the high part of it, right? And then you go up to G, that same thing, coming from that, right? So like I said, that's why seeing all your different, the forms and then breaking them down into 3-note voicings, hence the triads, it really helps. And then, like, you know, say you wanted to make the G augmented or something. We're actually going to kind of do this in the next lesson. I'm going to show you how to play a melody with triads and stuff. But, you know, say you went... you know, you wanted to make it, I mean, it's kind of weird, but just for intents and purposes of the, you know, exercise, right? Like I said, just seeing those little variations on it really helps. One more, this is using triads with strings 2 through 4, and then we'll kind of wrap up, and we'll save some room for some questions here. But guys, if you would, let's pull up Diatonic Progression strings 2 through 4. Now here's the thing too. I could have shown you the other ones, and it's good to know that if you want to go even to the lower registers. Like, the thing is in terms of a chord solo and stuff, it kind of gets muddy down there. So I just sort of chose not to do that. But so we're just gonna, you know, and same with drop 2s and stuff, we're gonna mostly stick with strings 1 through 4. It's just easier, or you know, it makes more sense as a guitar player. But yeah, here's our next one, and we have, it's just, you know, so here's my first triad, right there, and there. Now we're just using strings 1 through 4. So I mean, that's pretty easy, right? Coming right from there, and then next D minor. Right? Right, like I said, those are great, you know, nice little triad type voicings that are super useful. I mean, another example, just going back to examples, we talked about Chet, we talked about like reggae and production and recording and putting these things in, you know, panning left and right and all that. You know, if you like look at R&B and stuff, you know. You know, that's all triad kind of stuff. Like I said, just super useful, you know, a different light on just a single line solo, or like a just, you know, what did I do? You know, just like I said, these nice little voicings rather than just the bigger ones, right? So like I said, it's a lot of work, you know, and kind of figuring all that out, but you know, a few minutes a day and everything, and you could do so many cool things. And you know, the other thing that we're going to talk about a lot next week is you can also start, you know, doing different kinds of chordal voicing. So let's just go back to like C like this, right? You know, we have 5, 3, 1. You know, if you wanted to make it a major 7, you could sub major 7 with 1, right? And also equals E minor, and that's a whole another theory conversation. But for some of you that know what I'm talking about there, like that's where you can really start killing two birds with one stone, because you start to see these shapes and you're hearing them, but it's like, oh, I get that. So then, you know, when it comes to single line solos and stuff, you just gain more knowledge and have, you know, a bigger, you know, you can just do a lot more. But yeah, or, you know, or then also like you could sub, say, and so what we did is we took the root and then we subbed the major 7 with the root. You could also do it with the 5th. So just go back to your first, you know, 5, 3, 1, right, of C. Well, where is this possible? Where is the major, you know, the 7th with the G? Because I said we could sub that out, right? So you can move it up to here. And you have another nice voicing, you know, and like I said, we're going to get more into that next week and stuff. But, you know, there's like little tricks like that where you can, you know, like if you took, right, if you wanted to make it like a suspension, which is just, you know, a suspension is a 4 instead of a 3, right? Kind of suspending the resolution, if you will. Well, where's 3? Right here, so. And like I said, and then, you know, you kind of figure out the ones that work for you and that don't. And before you know it, you have like a really cool sound rather than just going, or, you know. It just becomes like a neat little, you know, tune. And like going back to, you know, another thing, you can just embellish stuff like I was doing earlier with triads, where, say, you know, especially I feel like for like R&B and stuff, you know, if you have like the second example that's on the screen now, you know, you can do stuff like, I'm doing there is like if I'm starting an octave up, there's my C triad, right? And I'm playing everything that's in the C scale. So like I said, you need to know that it's just C, E, G, or that's the triad, you know, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, right? But C triad, I'm just getting the scale tone above right there from the root. So B, or D, I'm sorry, right? And now we have the diminished, right? Grabbing to the C note, and then we have an A minor, jumping up to there to grab that. And it's kind of, you can add stuff like in passing, you know, and it becomes very musical, you know, so yeah, that's, you know, like I said, that's shedding some light on triads here. Well, yeah, guys, you know, I know that was a lot of stuff. Like I said, just a little bit, a couple times a week totally, you know, helps. And, you know, like I said, I encourage you to go through all of them, all the keys, do all that. You know, for this course, we're mostly going to concentrate on, you know, strings 1 through 4. But, and like I said, we'll kind of do, you know, a cool triad study with like a melody next week. And we'll, you know, add some different colors and stuff, and, you know, it'll make more sense. But anyways, yeah, now let's open it up for some questions here. I'm sure we have some. That was a lot of stuff. So, all right. Yep, Q&A time. What's going on, everybody? All right, so there's a lot of information in that lesson. Like I said, take it step at a time. I will say real quick before we get into the questions, just one more thing, you know, like just start with each and try to just kind of master those. You know, make sure you understand it, and, you know, you can get the muscle memory going as well. It's not a, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? Just always remember that. Okay, so question number 1, we have M. Richard. I have trouble stretching my pinky on some of the low strings, cage shapes. Do you have any tips to get those stretches? Yeah, okay, so this is going to kind of come from, I kind of learned this from a classical background. And the thing about that is always keeping, you know, I mean, people play differently. Some people, you know, like I'm really bad at grabbing bass notes with my thumb. It's very awkward to me, you know. So, I mean, sometimes, unfortunately, your hands are built differently. Like I notice with my playing, if I'm playing like F or B flat a lot, it generally, like I said, because the frets are wider, it tends to wear my hand out. Maybe not so much as on an electric, but some things you just can't help, right? But keeping your thumb in the middle of the neck, right? Like right there, that helps a lot. And I feel like that corrects a lot of problems. You know, people have come to me over the years and they're like, oh, you know, it's like, well, I can't get this chord. Well, it's like if your thumb over here, you know, that can be a problem. So, you know, try to keep it in the middle. Like I said, I mean, you know, just going back to C, how we learned it, you know. Or, you know, I mean, so then you'd have minor. I'm trying to think of the ones with more of the stretches here. You know, you can always too, like, I mean, sometimes this is sort of, you know, if you mentioned the pinky, I mean, you could try with your third finger. I mean, I feel like you have more strength with, you know, or, you know, stretch ability with your pinky, but, you know, don't be afraid too, just because it's on paper, like where I have the fingerings marked, and, you know, I mentioned that too, like, these are just kind of choice ones for me. You know, take that with a grain of salt. You don't always have to, you know, you can always come up with your own fingerings and stuff. So, if that helps, and yeah, I mean, some of them, you know, like diminished, right? If that's a problem for you, right? So we're coming from our A form back into G form, like we mentioned, right? You know, if you know, I think, you know, either one of those is fine. You know, pinky, third, first, right, or third. Sometimes too, you know, you can think creative if you want to put a lick in there too, and we're going to kind of talk about this more next week with sort of the triadic chord melody and stuff. There's like the diminished thing, but you can kind of get a lick with a lick within a lick, if you will, right? So yeah, I mean, just experiment, like I said, but keeping your thumb, that's good technique. You know, some people might think this is dorky. I don't. I pretty much record and play like this all the time. But, you know, there's a reason why classical guys sit, like, you know, it's easier on your back. I mean, and you'll notice that kind of stuff if you go and you play 2 hours of material or something for, you know, just back to back with no breaks or something, you know, that's like, you know, technique, like when you jump up here, you know, the way your thumb is, it's almost like an upright bass player or something. So, you know, you might want to experiment with that. Like I said, sometimes there's nothing you can do about it either, but, you know, like I said, my battle is B flat, you know, in particular, it's like, if I'm working doing something B flat all day, it's like, you know, especially an acoustic guitar, so... But I hope that helps. Okay, Eyes Without a Face here. We have, when do you use the augmented chord? It's not in the diatonic progression. True. Good question. So, like I mentioned with the Beatles, augmented chord definitely works really well on a 5 chord, right? So in the key of C, you know, a G augmented, right? You know... Nice thing, but probably on a 5. I mean, you could also do it like on any sort of like altered, you know, kind of scale, sort of in terms of like soloing. Like, and what I'll do a lot, and like Django did this a lot too, is if you start off with a 5 chord. So say you're, you know, so you know, we're in C, right? But you start. That's kind of a cool lick, right? So just, here's a fun one, you know, if you take the augmented and just go up by whole steps. right? So you have whole tone scale, which is all step away. That's like a neat thing to kick off. So like, you know, say you had a bass player in there too, or another guitar, just to give you a context. You know, if you have like, you know, you're starting there and you want to kick off the tune. The Disney lick, you know, when it goes into the dream sequence. And that, what I'm doing there is I'm just sweeping too in terms of right hand technique. Just start by knowing the Augmented Triad, right? And this isn't all necessarily G at this point. I'm just giving you a good use for it here, but just up whole steps. I'm using my first finger, right, as my guide to see G, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, F, G, right? And then right hand technique wise, it's a upstroke on the high E, and then you kind of rake down. It's all downstrokes, right? This is kind of getting into gypsy jazz world a little bit, but right. And then, like I said, the more comfortable you get with it. Yeah, and then like once you really get comfortable with it, you kind of let your right hand, it's like, I don't know, it's almost like a little mini sweep, right? But that's a really cool use. Like I said, it's kind of out there as well. But you know, if you're playing like I said, a ballad or something, and you know, say you do an intro. So if you go back to my other course, right, the Slices of Jazz, you know, say we we talked about all those intros and outros. You can go like, right. This is kind of like one that I taught y'all a couple weeks ago. Right? And then the tune kicks off, right? So there's a good use for augmented. All right. We got Picklehead. Is that an Ibanez AF75? What amp are you using there? Cool. So this is a AK84, I believe. It's an AK85. Be cool if it was an AF because my name's Austin Flingo, you know? Yeah, it's, you know, this is a great guitar. Solid, very affordable, highly recommend them. I actually bought it from a friend of mine. What he did as well is if you look on the inside, there's a drumstick, like a piece of a drumstick holding both sides, you know, the top and the bottom together, and that helps with feedback. But this guitar also is very, very versatile. Like, I mean, this guitar can get pretty crunchy, you know. And then it's a great jazz bot. It's great all around. I really like it. I've had it for years. Highly recommend it. So tone-wise, what I'm using is an HX Stomp. Also love those things. I do a ton of recording, and it's, you know, I've been searching for a long time to find, you know, the amp sims. I mean, you know, some of them are pretty good. I've used all kinds of different ones. They all have their strengths and weaknesses, but the HX Stomp is pretty awesome. And, you know, it's comparable, you know, it's Helix with Line 6. You know, I thought about getting a Kemper too. Kempers are definitely more money. Kempers are more like $2,000. I think an HX you can get for about $700. But they're really awesome. And then you can get like you could buy the packs from folks. The packs are great. Like Michael Britt, he makes them for the Kemper and HX. And you know, I'm just using right now. This is it's a deluxe clean, and it's got like a little bit of didn't even look today. Yeah, it's just got a little bit of spring reverb on it. You know, a little bit of compression to kind of even it out. But yeah, I mean, they're great. And two, like if you even look at the, I think with Sims too, and you know, this is maybe getting, you know, a little heavy info-wise, but you know, like a lot of amp sims I find when I go to EQ them, there's like all that junk frequency, like the high end, the low end, something that would never be in an amp, right? And you notice that with the HX and stuff. It's like all that's gone. It's been, you know, modeled, and it's got the impulse responses and all that. It's been done really well. So yeah, like I said, pick one up. They have their own little interface and everything too. I don't really use that, but it also has its own that computer interface. They're great. Yeah, highly recommend in terms of, I've been super happy with it. Yeah, so I'm ampless. I'm in the box, but it sounds good. All right, Big Jim 789. So you mentioned adding color tones to triads. Can you explain how to incorporate that? Yeah, so I mean, essentially what we just talked about too with like the augmented, that's a color tone. But another way to look at this, and we're gonna definitely talk a lot about this next week because we're gonna get much more into that. But you remember, like with, you know, let's just start with these guys right here, right? In a way, I mean, these are all colors too, right? You have major, minor, you know, augmented, diminished, right? Then you have, you know, those are just like very common practical, you know, ways to stack a triad. But you can also like replace notes, and we're gonna do this next week. But this is what I really love about triads, and what really like blew my mind, you know. It's like, here's your root, right? You can replace the root with a 9. And I mean, that's like a very cool sound. And there's a stretch right there, right? Keep that thumb in the middle of the neck, folks. But you could do like really cool stuff with that. You know, you can replace the third with a 9 right there or something, right? And you get these really neat sounds. So yeah, and you know, like you can take a, you know, here's your, you know, you can also like replace your root with a 6, right? And what it is we're so used to all these stock chords, right? Like, you know, just the basic stuff, and even like the jazz stuff to an extent. And you know, if you listen to like some modern guys like Kurt Rosenwinkel and stuff, they're really good at this kind of stuff. And I don't know, like chordal type chords, quartal, right? Not chordal, but quartal with the Q. But you know, like when I started hearing that, I was like, oh, that's really cool. And you know, and that's what's cool. It's like if you study some triads and then kind of, you know, start putting stuff in there like that. Like if we bumped up here, right? You can come up with that C major 7 right there, but, or like put the 6 down here. Check this out. Super neat, you know? And you know, there's some rules there that need to be followed, but you know, generally like with a root, you know, if you use a 6 or a major 7, a 6 or something. But super cool sound, right? So that's kind of how you would add those colors. And we'll do some of that next week because I'll have a chord progression and a melody, and I'll kind of, you know, I think that'll make more sense. But, you know, what's important this week, you know, and it is a lot of info, right? But it's, you know, learn those kind of fundamental triads and stuff. What's important is that you can kind of see that. And, you know, I said several is a puzzle piece, you know, that we're trying to figure out. And by knowing like all those everywhere, you know, it's just it helps your playing, and you know, chordally, like I said, you can also come up with the cool sounds, but also, you know, somebody asked, what was it the other day, about well, how do you know when you like solo? I tend to get lost because I like, say, you know, where I'm on a C chord and then D minor comes up, and it's like, I don't really know. And that's why you need to know like your arpeggios and stuff. It's you just have to know it, you know, because like how I look at that, and when I was demonstrating it, it's like, you know, if I go, you know, I see all that, and I you know, I see the arpeggio, I see the chord, but I also see like the parts of the chord, which are the triads, right? And it takes a while, but by kind of the better you're going to get at it. And you know, any sort of way that you can do that, you know, both with your ears, you know, visually, whatever is a win-win. So so that's that. So guys, yeah, thanks for being here. We're gonna wrap up now. Like I said, next week we're gonna be doing we're gonna do some chord melody stuff with triads, and we'll do some color tones and all that. So come on, yeah, come on back, and then like I said, then before you know it, we'll be rocking some chord solos. All right, y'all. Have a good afternoon. I'll talk to you soon.